trying to get an airstrike over on that opposite side. Copy.
What's up everyone, Tom from the Airsoft headquarters here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very quick overview video for you guys, and that is going to feature a relatively newer product. If you guys have not seen any of the SHOT Show footage or SHOT Show experiences that we've shared across all of our other social medias, this is coming from the Valken company. This is the Smith & Wesson 1911. Now, there's a couple of things that you guys may be aware of if you guys are a little more experienced, a little more in tune to who has what license in the airsoft market. Elite Force technically does have the Smith & Wesson license. Now, why would Valken have it? Well, Valken and Elite Force 2 years ago did announce that they have a partnership, a relationship, that they will be co-distributing each other's products. So that's a very, very cool system, and it's really cool to see those companies get closer together. Everyone within Airsoft should be getting a little bit closer. We shouldn't have nearly as many disagreements and arguments and these little fights amongst each other as often as we do. So they're a very, very, very good example. So there's a couple of reasons as to why they may have the Smith & Wesson license. It could be that for the Smith & Wesson 1911s, Elite Force just didn't have any type of interest, and Valken was able to pick it up. It could be that the license term, as far as the duration of Elite Force holding the 1911 Smith & Wesson license, may have expired and Valken picked it up, or it could have been a partnered licensed product. And there's a couple of things as to cluing in as to why the latter may actually be the reason. Because this 1911 is actually the KWC manufactured 1911. If you guys are not familiar with the Elite Force 1911s, those are manufactured by KWC. So this and the Elite Force 1911 are coming out of the same factory. But there are still a couple of differences between the two of them, and that's kind of what we're going to go over here. Externally, you may notice that these are going to be very, very similar as far as a 1911 construction. I'm rolling my sleeves up because it's starting to get warmer again. We had a crazy snowstorm, but it's warming up again. So as far as the externals go, it is going to be a standard 1911 as far as form and fitment. Now, what changes is going to be that this is going to be a little bit more modern of a 1911 configuration. It has front and rear serrations along the slide. It has the 3-dot iron sight system. It has a more modernized Picatinny rail system, and that's kind of it as far as the modernized 1911. Some of the Elite Forces are going to have some of the more basic construction of slide and rails, the 1911 A1s, and there are the 1911 Tacks, which have the same features here. But this one is just slightly different colored, and it has a imitation wood grip here. And the other thing internally is that this is going to have a higher velocity compared to the Elite Force 1911s, which is going to be shooting 370 feet per second and then goes down from there. So this is not indoor legal. That is a very, very quick overview of this Smith & Wesson 1911. Now, if you guys want to actually see the in-depth one, here we go. We're going to go from tip to butt for anyone that actually wants to get nitty-gritty into it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go tip to butt with you guys. So up front we have the mandatory orange tip, which is threaded 14 counterclockwise. There is a little bit more paint on residue on the actual tip itself. So if you did want to screw any type of trace unit mock suppressor, this is one of the top 2 brands or models that I would suggest throwing trace unit or mock suppressor on. But just be careful, you will start to wear away at the paint on the very tip there. So it's going to end up being more silver later on. It does have a metal barrel assembly, and then for the slide itself, it is going to be an all metal system with that pinned front iron sight system that is not adjustable. It is stuck there. We do have the front serration, so if anyone wants to do the thumb over in order to pull back, in order to do a super cool guy chamber check, you can do so. The Smith & Wesson Springfield, Massachusetts, USA licensing on the left side of the slide, and then a really large safety warning label on the right side of the slide that is underneath that ejection port. And behind the ejection port is going to be the rear serrations, which you can grab onto if you want to do the rear slide rack system. So say you are out, you can pull back here and that should release the slide forward, or if it's back like so, you can do the press backwards with the thumb here and that's going to release it back forward. So you have a couple of different ways in order to rack the slide back if you want to do more of the gross mechanic style. Otherwise, you can just hit that slide release on the left-hand side there, which is not ambidextrous. It is just on the right hand or the left-hand side of the slide, traditional 1911 style. We do have the 2-dot rear iron sight system. Again, this is not an adjustable iron sight system. It is still pinned in place. They just make that easier so that it's not going to work itself loose. It is going to be a hammer fire system. So as long as that hammer is back, it will rock forward and fire a shot. So for example, without having to rack the slide, if we just have the hammer back and then, you know, solid grip here, it's gonna shoot a shot. It is not a double action. So if we have the hammer all the way forward, slide that magazine in, nothing is going to happen until we pull that hammer back, and then we're gonna get a single shot. Makes sense? I hope so. And that's it for the slide. It's a really basic slide assembly. We're gonna go downwards. We do have a 3-slot rail system on the very bottom here. So if you have any type of tactical flashlight, I'm utilizing the Streamlight TLR1s or the Olight Valkyrie PLR Pro. Those are going to attach onto here, and then you have your controls there. Anything that's going to be a more modern Picatinny or a rail system, attachment system is going to fit in place here. Obviously, anything that's going to be dovetail will not fit. Anything that's going to be a really cheap Amazon, Wish, whatever else is out there, I don't care for all those cheaper stuff because I want my stuff to last. Going backwards, we do have the trigger guard, which is rounded, traditional 1911 style, a metal trigger assembly, which is very unique because it is kind of skeletonized. It does have the cuts here in order to make it more weight reduced, and it does have a hole drilled into the very bottom of the trigger itself, which you typically see on the adjustable length of pull for 1911 triggers specifically. So it's definitely a cool thing that they included, but they did not include the actual adjustable portion of the trigger itself. So we're still stuck with the standard 1911 triggers, which are not bad at all. You can still get really good as far as feeling where that wall is, being able to re-engage it, which the trigger itself is really, really short. You just release here, get that click, and then you're back on it. Release, click, and you're back on it. There's not a whole lot of pull. I would say there's, actually, I'm gonna re-engage that. Doop. And release. Probably four or 5 mils as far as a reset system. So it's still really, really good comparatively to some of the other double action, the really long trigger resets. So you can still get a good trigger response off this guy. Standard 1911 magazine release. This is not going to be ambidextrous either, so just keep that in mind that this guy is for righties. And then we have our imitation wood grips, which are not real wood and they are not sized for real 1911s. The airsoft sizing is specific to airsoft 1911, so you do need to make sure to get airsoft aftermarket 1911 grips and not just any 1911 grip. So do be careful. A lot of people do like to swap them out. There are lots of other manufacturers that will make aftermarket grips. But you do need to make sure that they are going to be airsoft sized and spec'd. I already mentioned it, but the slide release, super easy. Once it's engaged, then you can release it and the slide goes back forward. The only ambidextrous part here is going to be the safety itself. So that's going to be a more modern, tactical 1911 style where you have left-hand side and right-hand side that is going to be your thumb safety. And that just gets activated either way. Really basic. Now what's unique with the 1911s that a lot of people sometimes get hung up on is going to be the Beaver tail safety here. So you actually have multiple sets of safeties, not only just your thumb safety, but you also have this Beaver tail safety, which you have to have engaged in order to fire the system. So if you even have the safety off up here and you are trying to shoot that trigger, it's not going to actuate until you actually hold down on the Beaver tail safety and then it will fire. So that's a really cool additional safety feature for the 1911s that sometimes people get hung up on. On the very bottom here, we do have a lanyard attachment system. That again is something that we have seen previously in wars or with law enforcement guys, is that they will have a springy lanyard system that will attach directly to their belt. That way when they come up and draw, something happens, they get into a fight, the 1911 or the pistol that is attached to them will still be attached via that lanyard. So if you do start to run away, then you're not gonna lose it on the field or anywhere else like that. It's still gonna just bounce around on the ground behind you. The magazine that's gonna come with it is going to be a standard 14 round single stack. It's like a single stack. It's not, it kind of double stacks. It's not a true double stack, but it's also not a true single stack. So it looks more like a single stack, but it does kind of do an every other type of stagger stack, which is cool. You get the 14 rounds. What is weird though is that there's so much spring here that they could have deepened the overall channel as far as the parts that hang over and hold the BBs in. For example, I can pull the follower down all the way down here and you can still stack a couple more BBs on there. So I honestly think that they should have just made that top part here just a little bit longer in length. We can get a little more BBs, going from a 14 round magazine to maybe an 18 or 19 round magazine. That would have been cool, but for some reason they decided instead of making those channels longer, they decided to make a hole in place here to make it easier to load and unload, which is cool. That's a newer feature on the KWC 1911s, on the Elite Forces, these guys here, and even the Colt licensed that we carry here as well. They're now including a hole for you to drop the BBs into. Before, there was no hole. But the trick that I had was I would take my fingernail, pull down on the follower, which is very, very, very tough, and I would just hold the magazine like this and just drop the BBs into the follower at the end of my finger and not at the top of the magazine itself, which makes reloading this way easier. And I just wish they would have made the channels a little bit longer. But, you know, I'm not part of that R&D team, so hindsight's 2020. Otherwise, these are absolutely solid magazines. We have 1911s within the staff collection that are at this point 10 years old, and they're still rocking and they're still rolling. They don't get used nearly as often. They're kind of more of a trusty backup in most cases because we have much nicer, more modern pistols that we can use in a semi-automatic fashion. And at this point, it's kind of turned into a collective piece anyway. a 10-year-old 1911 from Elite Force. So these are very, 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 very sturdy. I will say that with the CO2 inside of here, if you guys are not familiar, the 12-gram CO2 canisters hold 900 pounds per square inch of gas compressed inside of here. That's a lot of gas pressure. So don't leave your CO2 inside of the magazine here. That will start to overpressurize the rubber O-rings that are inside of the decompression chamber, the release chamber that is built into the magazine itself. It will start to produce leaks. They are relatively easier of a size to get a hold of in order to replace those O-rings. In fact, we have O-rings here for the KWC 1911 magazines here. So if you do start to produce leaks, we can change those out, fix them up, get them back up into operating order. But just for the longevity's sake, don't keep CO2 in here. And you're like, Talon, well, everyone with gas magazines tells me to leave them in there. That's great. Gas magazines are a different story. You are supposed to have a little bit of gas inside there in order to keep the O-rings pressurized. These don't do that because it's 900 PSI versus 115 PSI. 900, 115. Very drastic pressure differences. You will also need, I would suggest, silicone oil in order to regulate, or not regulate, but to make sure that your O-rings are still moist, they still have that rubbery feature to them. Of the O-rings that we replaced, we noticed that they end up being super flat. They almost, instead of like a true O-ring, they become flat like a pancake. Almost like you take a flat rubber band and you just hold it like a disc here. They become super, super, super flat, and that does not a good job for holding gas inside of your magazine. So 1911 magazines, if you're done for the day, just while you're on the field, just go off to the side and just shoot through the CO2. You can dry fire it and just, the point is to slowly release that gas pressure inside of these O-rings. Otherwise, what happens is if you take your Allen screw that comes in the box here, you plug it in there and you start to undo it, that is going to mess with the puncture valve on the inside here. And a lot of times that puncture valve sponge will fly out and the filter will disappear onto the field somewhere. So shoot through your CO2 and don't just release it all the way. Very particular about these magazines because that's of these KWC 1911s, the issues come from not proper care with the magazine itself. So please keep that in mind. Now we've talked about the externals of the 1911. Let's go and talk about the internals here. So in order to disassemble your 1911, pull the slide all the way back, lock it into position. So what I'm doing is just pressing up on that slide release so it locks into place. Come forward just a little bit so you have a single cutout for that slide release to catch up, and then you have the one right behind it, which is you're gonna line that up with the very end of the slide release. Press on this side, the right side of the frame, in order to push and pull the slide release out like that. And then it comes apart like so. So you have your frame assembly and you have your slide assembly. That is how you take this apart, disassemble it for any type of cleaning or maintenance. If you do find yourself having to replace parts and components, the Elite Force 1911s do have rebuild kits for the majority of parts and components that you will find in these, because the Elite Force 1911s and the KWCs that produce these are the exact same. So the Elite Force 1911s will, rebuild kits, 1911 rebuild kits will work for these. And I started disassembling this just based on pure instinct. And I need to tell you guys how to take it apart. So you have your slide assembly here. You can disassemble it even further. The recoil spring guide rod can press forward towards the front of the slide here. move it off to the side, and you can pull your spring and spring guide rod out of place. This here is your spring cap that slides out and up. Then you're gonna come to the very front here. There's another washer that will rotate off to one side and then pull away from the barrel. And then with that, you can grab the end of your barrel and slide it out. Every once in a while, it will get caught like that. So just make sure you have it rotated in place and it comes out like a key from a keyhole. And then there is your slide assembly, disassembled. Now you have your, so when you are cleaning your 1911/CO2 pistols, do be aware that CO2 is technically a dry gas. So there's no silicone oil mixed into it. So you do need to clean and maintain it way more often than you do your green gas pistols. Keep that in mind. So I'll spray a little bit of silicone oil up into the blowback unit housing here, move it around like so, just a little bit. It doesn't need to be completely drenched in water or silicone oil. An additional note, 100% silicone oil, not like a 50-50 mix, and definitely do not use real firearm cleaning because the solvents inside of your real firearm cleaning kits are designed to dissolve and eat away at specific materials and plastics. So don't use your real firearm oil. Now, we have not had this 1911 for very long, and we definitely have not shot it a bunch, but it is still collecting quite a bit of grease and dirtiness. So just a little bit of Q-tips, some paper towels, and just running it along the inside of the slide assembly here, or the slide assembly. And then just trying to get it relatively clean. And that's really, for the slide, the only thing that I would oil. You definitely don't want to try to get oil inside of your hop-up unit or your inner barrel, because hop-up is based on friction of the bucking. And what does oil do? It stops friction. So we're definitely going to make sure to keep that bucking dry. We're gonna reassemble everything here. And then just doing a basic reverse of operation. So sliding the barrel in, rotate and locking that cap into place. The spring cap, and making sure that that holds the washer in place. And then your recoil spring and recoil spring guide rod. And that will lock into place. And that is the reassembly of your slide. Now, your frame here. I do not suggest you guys, if you have no experience with real firearms or airsoft disassemblies, to attempt to disassemble this, because there are very small springs, there are very small screws built inside of here that can get lost very, very easily. While they do make rebuild kits for these guys, it is not going to be the whole hammer assembly which makes up all of this. So be careful if you do mess around with it. What I like to do is I like to take some silicone oil, spray it inside of that hammer assembly. That way, because those are the parts that do get the next most amount of friction, just based on those internal hammers and springs just moving back and forth on top of each other. So I like to give it a little bit of oil just to help maintain it. And then we neat the railings on the frame, get everything to lock back in. Sometimes you need to assist those tabs downwards, all the way back. Your slide release, begin to slide in, and then move that slide downwards, applying gentle pressure of the slide release until it goes home and in place. And you can check the functionality, make sure you did everything correctly by locking the slide back, hitting the slide release, rocking the slide back, hitting the slide release, hammer, rack, hammer, rack, hammer. Overall, pretty good. And then making sure that your chamber is clear of BBs. If you do have any gas inside your magazine, you can do a basic function test. And you can see that there's a lot of silicone oil clouds coming out here as I shoot through whatever silicone oil was applied to the internals. So once that's been done, then I'll do an additional step of taking a unjamming rod, adding a little bit of paper towel to the end, and then pushing it through the inner barrel and through the bucking, being careful not to have too much towel. That way the bucking can't get ripped or pushed out of place, and just making sure that that bucking is still dry so it can induce friction for proper hop function. But that is what we have as far as the 1911s. Additional points that I want to bring to your guys' attention is the hammer here. Hammers do tend to break on 1911s relatively easily, just with too much dry firing, too much shooting, period. It will start to induce micro fractures in the hammer, because every time you want to fire, it needs to slap forward. So if you sit here so much and you're just hitting that hammer constantly against the back of the slide, that's going to, one, induce micro fractures, which eventually will lead to a total breakage of the hammer, as well as creating a small stamp of the set screw on the very back of the blowback unit housing, which leads to the next thing is, over time, that screw can work itself loose. So if you do have any type of weird hiccups, functionality issues, it could be that that screw needs to tighten itself up. Do not over tighten, just give it a little bit of tightening, but not too much, okay? And that's really it. These guys are very, very, very hardy. The KWC, or the Valken 1911s and some of the Colt 1911s from e-Vike do tend to shoot above what the Elite Forces do, because the Elite Forces go through a different quality control. They do have very specific blowback unit parts and components to get them to shoot below 330 feet per second. See, KWC also manufactures steel BB parts and components. So with these guys and the Colts, they are utilizing the same steel BB blowback unit housing and same type of release chamber inside here. The Elite Force 1911s, they do change that blowback unit housing and the chamber here so that they have much more regulated pressure for those airsoft BBs to shoot below 350 feet per second. And that is what we have as far as the Valken 1911. Velocities overall, the first 10 shots of a magazine are going to be shooting 370, and then the 10th shot is going to hit 344, in this case specifically. While these are not going to be total 100% nail driving shooting pistols, they are very, very, very reliable. They're very well built. They are designed for longevity and durability, not so much for performance. The overall controls and ergonomics of these 1911s are much more basic compared to other precision-based pistols, say the ASG CZ that we just did the review video on. This guy is a nail driver. If we're hitting cans at a distance of 75 feet consistently, very, very, very good grouping size on this part. However, terrible ergonomics, terrible controls. I don't like these guys at all based on those ergonomics. However, great, great shooting pistols. These guys, not the best as far as reliability or as far as consistency and accuracy. All right, now we're gonna do the accuracy test. We're gonna start off at 0 feet. Nailed it. Let's go to 25 feet. Okay, actual 25-foot test. I knew those hit. Those were good. 50 feet. Conveniently, we can use the tin can, since right here is 50 feet. See that green one right there? Yeah. Ooh. Four out of 5. I think the second shot I was pulling. Now, let's go back here at 100 feet. And actually, let's do 75 on the green thing again. I don't think you can handle the full 100. Ready? Miss. Hit. 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 I think that was a hit. I think that was a low hit. I will note that this doesn't slide out nicely by itself. You gotta encourage it or strip it out, like so. Yeah, but way better ergonomics compared to this guy here. So, my go-to suggestion, and conveniently, both of the ASG CZs and the KWC 1911s here, the KWC manufactured 1911s, both of these I would suggest and recommend for mock suppressors or tracer unit attachments on the very end here, because these are the two that will be able to cycle and reliably work with those attachments. Other makes and models of pistols, not so much. You're kind of not nearly as well as these two. However, you will need to decide if you do like the functionality of these guys and the performances. Do you want that super high precision availability and you're just gonna deal with the weird ergonomic issues that's happening with this guy? Or do you want the reliability and durability and functionality of this guy? That's kind of where, based on my experiences, that's kind of where the fork in the road is met. But overall, great functioning pistol. The magazines are going to be compatible with the Elite Force ones right here. So if you do want additional standard magazines, the Elite Forces will work and function. And if you want an extended magazine option, the extended Elite Force magazines will fit. Gas efficiency on these guys do tend to be pretty high as well. What we typically see is we usually get 4 to 4.5 magazine shots before we need to reload a CO2 canister. So, and that's based on these brand new, relatively new-ish 1911s. Obviously over time, those O-rings are gonna shrink, you're gonna lose efficiency, so on and so forth. But brand new, 4.5 magazines, so that's, do the math, it's gonna go up on the screen here. That's how many shots you should get on one of these guys brand new. We do prefer the Umrax and the Valken CO2 canisters. They are gonna go through additional steps in order to make sure that they are going to be cleaned out internally. Some other brands like the Crossmans or the Daisies have been known to have rust built up on the inside of the canisters here. And obviously as you shoot through those, that's going to have those dust particles get into the filter, into the regulatory chamber here, and up into the blowback unit housing, which is not good for long-term functionality. So keep that in mind as well, getting good brand CO2s in order to make sure that you do have a better chance of the longevity of your pistol. And that is going to wrap up our overview video. Thank you guys. If you did want to stay for the in-depth breakdown of this guy, thanks for staying to the end of the video. Additional news, we will be attending a Wisconsin event by the name of Ship of Fools. I want to make sure that I'm giving that event the due diligence. Go and attend it. We'll be there. I'm going to be on the Pirate faction if you guys do want to pre-register. And that's it as far as special news. If you guys do have any further questions about this 1911, any of the Elite Force 1911s, or anything in general, put it down into the comments section below. I will do my best to answer them, but we are all done here. So you guys take care, stay safe, stay positive, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Okay, actual 25-foot test. I knew where those hit. Those were good. 50 feet. Conveniently, we can use the tin can, since right here is 50 feet.